You're listening to Soap Dirt, the latest in television entertainment news.
Hey there, ABC soap opera fans. Today, we here at Soap Dirt on YouTube have got something sad to talk about with you. We are going to be looking back at some of the most tragic and sad deaths on General Hospital over the years. And of course, there have been many, many lives lost over the 6 decades that GH has been on the air. But we polled our soap writers room here at soapdirt.com, and we came up with the 5 names that we think we'd like to talk about as the saddest on General Hospital. Before we dig in, click that subscribe button below so you don't miss any of our updates as we report on news, spoilers, and some of the interesting look backs at General Hospital history. So we are going to talk about these in order of the least to most recent. So as we start, we're going to dial the time machine back to Port Charles in 1993, and you might already know who we're going to be talking about, and that is adorable little BJ Jones, okay? You might have already guessed that by the year, but Barbara Jean Jones was named for her mother, Bobby Spencer, and her father, if you don't remember, was Tony Jones. Her parents were played by Jacqueline Zeman and Brad Mall, and adorable little BJ was played by young actress Brighton Hertford. At the time of BJ's death, her parents were already having a hard time because Bobby had been going behind Tony's back with Damian Smith, played by Lee McCloskey. He was the son of mobster Frank Smith, if you don't remember. And in fact, Tony was brawling with Damian over Bobby, and she tried to break it up when someone came in to notify them that their daughter had been in a terrible accident. That was nurse Amy Vinings, who broke between them to tell them that BJ was hurt. By the time that EMTs got little BJ to General Hospital, her condition was dire, and at one look, her dad, being a doctor, Tony knew that she was probably brain dead. At the same time, her little cousin, Maxie Jones, who was just a little tyke back then also, had heart failure and was facing death if she did not get a heart transplant. So immediately, Tony knew that the right thing to do was to donate BJ's heart to save Maxie's life. But Bobby was so devastated, and she initially refused, but Tony told her, nothing's going to bring our little girl back. So they knew they had to say goodbye, and it was a gut-wrenching, heartbreaking moment on General Hospital. Tony's final words to BJ were, when you give your heart to Maxie, I will give my heart to you, and we will both be safe. Bless you, BJ. I love you. Later, after the heart transplant, Tony went in to check on Maxie, and there was just this heartbreaking scene. If you were watching back then, or if you've ever seen the video, it's so sad. It's so damn sad. Tony Jones laid his head down on Maxie's little chest so that he could hear BJ's heart beating in her chest. Of course, it was a miracle to them because even though they lost their daughter, her heart keeps on living inside Maxie, as it still does to this day. But the death of BJ Jones is still one that haunts many longtime GH viewers. For the number 2 death, we are going to skip 2 years ahead to 1995, and you may already know who we're going to mention. It is Stone Cates, who was played by Michael Sutton from 1993 up until the time of his death, and in a few subsequent ghostly visits since then. Stone Cates remains one of the most talked about deaths on General Hospital because, if you don't remember, the nurses' ball was begun in his honor, and typically he's mentioned at almost every nurse's ball, if not on stage, at least by other people talking about the event. You may recall that Stone was the younger brother of Jagger Cates, played by Antonio Sabato Jr., and Stone was the teenage love of Robin Scorpio, who is still played by Kimberly McCullough, although she doesn't appear very often on the soap anymore. Stone and Jagger had this really sad backstory. At one point, they were homeless, living on the streets, and while living that terrible life, Stone wound up infected with HIV, but they didn't know it. He got tested, and one test was positive, the first test was negative, and then he and Robin slept together, and then another test came back positive, and so he had inadvertently infected Robin. This was a groundbreaking story at the time on GH that highlighted the heartbreak of HIV/AIDS. And at the time of his death, Robin and Sonny Corinthos were Stone's primary caregivers. Sonny saw Stone as a pseudo-son, and he adored him. In the last months of his life, Stone was almost blind, and in one of his last moments on General Hospital, he asked Robin to stand by the window so he could see her one last time, and miraculously, his eyesight cleared enough so he could actually see her. His final words were, "Robin, I see you." And then he died. This death hit a lot of people hard. Poor Stone had had such a hard life, and he was still a teenager when he died. And of course, Stone's love for Robin and hers for him was so pure and beautiful to see. And that made it even more heartbreaking when she lost Stone Cates. And of course, Stone was absolutely horrified that he'd infected Robin with HIV. However, she's still alive now, although she doesn't come back to Port Charles often, but she is a case study on the soap for successfully managing HIV. We've seen Michael Sutton back as Stone a few times as a ghost in 2010, 2017, and most recently in 2021, he has returned to visit both Robin and Sonny, and his death remains tragic. Our number 3 sad death on General Hospital, we skip ahead to 2007, 12 years later, to November of 2007, and that is for the death of Emily Bowen Quartermaine. You may remember that Amber Tamblyn originated the role when she was a teen, but at the time of her death, it was Natalia Livingston playing the part of Emily. Way back in the day, Emily Bowen's mother died of cancer. She was left an orphan, and she was taken in by Alan and Monica Quartermaine. You may remember this was after Monica's own breast cancer crisis, and at one point in time, Emily herself had a life and death battle with breast cancer during her time on General Hospital, but it wasn't breast cancer that took her life. It was something much more violent and terrible. Of course, you'll recall that Leslie Charlson plays Monica and Stuart Damon played Alan on GH, and Emily was part of the young kind of teen scene when she first came on with Lucky Spencer, Elizabeth Weber, and Nicholas Cassadine. That was when she was played by Tamblyn. Then when Natalia Livingston was recast in the role, one of her biggest romances was with Nicholas Cassadine, and in fact, they were engaged at the time of her brutal murder. After some twists and turns, Emily survived her cancer battle, and she and Nicholas reunited. He even came back from the brink of death for her twice, surviving a fire and amnesia after a near-fatal car crash. Helena Cassadine hated them being together and cursed their love, but they thought they had broken the curse by going through this ritual, and we have to say that considering how tragically Emily Quartermaine died, maybe it was Helena's curse still lurking around. Her death came at a terribly young age at a black and white ball that Nicholas and Emily threw out at Windermere when she told him that she always liked the Bacchanalia galas. So that gala started Halloween night, October 31st, 2007, and it was just a string of scary things that happened. Right before the guests arrived for the ball, Nicholas proposed to Emily. They had been married once before but divorced, and they had this roundabout journey to get back to each other, but they were completely smitten and loved each other, and they were thrilled to announce their reunion and engagement that night. But then mob boss Anthony Zaccara turned the ball into a nightmare, and despite everything he did, he was not the scariest guy there, because after the dust settled and Nicholas went looking for Emily, he found her dead with a rope wrapped around her neck. She was a victim of the prolific text message killer. That was Diego Alcazar, if you don't remember. Diego later confessed that he murdered Emily to hurt Jason Morgan and Sonny Corinthos. Remember, she was Jason's adoptive sister, but they treated each other like full-blood brother and sister. And Sonny had fallen for Emily, although things didn't work out for them because he didn't want her around him because she was with with him when he was initially diagnosed with bipolar. And between that and his mobster life, he decided it was a bad idea. And then, of course, she ended up with her soulmate, Nicholas, at the time of her death. Emily Quartermaine's death was definitely a tragedy on GH. However, Natalia Livingston has reprised the role for ghostly visits a couple of times on General Hospital, and so maybe we haven't seen the last of her. Now, our number 4 death, we're going to skip a decade ahead to Detective Nathan West, played by the gorgeous Ryan Pavey. He had a nearly 5-year run on the ABC soap from 2013 through his character's death in early 2018. Nathan West was Maxie Jones' soulmate and husband, and the father of her son James, who had not been born by the time his dad died. When Nathan and Maxie first met each other, it was a lot of fun. He had sublet her apartment, and then she came back with Port Charles. That was back in the day when she was involved with skeevy conman Levi Dunkelman, played by Zachary Garrett, and she and Nathan just did not get along. It was not love at first sight. As a matter of fact, they kind of despised each other. And you may recall Nathan West has this bizarre backstory because his birth mother was Dr. Liesl Obrecht, and his birth father was Ubervillain Cesar Faison. They are played by Kathleen Gotti and Anders Hove. Liesl was scared of Faison getting his hands on her son and just being a horrible, horrible person. And so she handed him over to her wicked sister, Madeline Reeves, to raise. You may recall Madeline was played by Donna Mills on General Hospital. So Nathan had found out a little while before his death the truth of his paternity and that he was adopted, and so he was getting to know Liesl as his mother and Britt Westbourne, played by Kelly Tybaud, as his sister. And of course, Britt is now dead also, so Liesl has lost both of her children at this point. But in a horrible twist of fate, a very soapy twist of fate, it was Nathan's biological father that took his life. After decades of Liesl Obrecht hiding him from Faison, Faison was back in Port Charles and wreaking havoc, and he shot Nathan in the chest right in front of Maxie. Maxie cried but dialed 911, and the EMTs came and they took Nathan to GH. He had emergency surgery and he woke up a few hours later. So Maxie was full of hope. She thought, oh, this is great. He has survived this. She was pregnant with their son James at the time, and she felt their baby kick for the first time, and Nathan was able to put his hand on her stomach and feel his son. He told Maxie, "I love you, Maxie, like there's no tomorrow." And then he just died, just suddenly and terribly. It was heartbreaking and instantaneous. He was a hero of the PCPD. He got a full honors funeral on February 9th, 2018. And Nathan remains someone that is mentioned fairly often because Maxie talks about him. She always wants James to know about his dad. Liesl has talked about him in light of losing Britt recently. And it was a true tragedy and one that fans would like to see reversed, but it doesn't look like he's going to be coming back from the dead. Before we dig into our fifth and final sad death on General Hospital, reach down and click that subscribe button so you don't miss any updates from Soap Dirt on YouTube about General Hospital and all your favorite soaps. Now, we are going to stick to the same year that Nathan West died, 2018, as we talk about our most recent tragic death, and that is the death of Kiki Jerome. This young woman was brutally murdered the same year that Nathan West died, and she was played by Haley Aaron at the time of her death, but Kristen Alderson originated the role back in 2013, so she had a similar lifespan on the ABC soap as Nathan. Kiki was the daughter of Ava Jerome, of course played by Mara West, and her father was Silas Clay, played by Michael Easton in one of his many and varied roles over the years on the ABC soap. But Kiki was raised to believe that serial killer Franco was his father, played by Roger Howarth until that character's death. And so it was all very confusing, and the reveal with Silas only happened after he was stabbed. So it was this terrible thing. When Kiki first came on, she had been involved with both Morgan Corinthos and Michael Corinthos, but at the time of her death, she had been seeing Dr. Griffin Monroe, played by Matt Cohen, and it was her seeing Griffin that put her at odds with her mother, Ava, because Ava had been dating Griffin and had fallen for him, but he just couldn't deal with the worst parts of Ava and broke things off, and he and Kiki initially tried to fight their attraction, but then they didn't. What was particularly sad and awful about Kiki's death was, first, it was at the hands of serial killer Ryan Chamberlain, and second, Ryan stabbed her to death thinking he was doing her mother Ava a twisted favor. To this day, Ava has this intense pain over her daughter's death, but she has some little bit of comfort now that Ryan Chamberlain is also dead. However, when Ava had the chance to shoot him, she wavered. Fortunately, Max Scorpio did the job for her, finishing off Ryan Chamberlain once and for all. Kiki Jerome's death remains one that is mentioned now and then, most recently in context with Esme Prince, played by Avery Kristen Pohl. You may remember when Esme and Spencer Cassadine, whom Nicholas Chavez plays, were tormenting Ava. Esme resurrected the memory of Kiki. Esme set Ava's car on fire at the General Hospital parking garage and left Kiki Jerome's hospital lanyard near the scene of the crime. The fire was scary enough for Ava, but finding Kiki's lanyard there just resurrected all her anguish over losing her daughter, and she remains haunted by it. So those are our 5 saddest General Hospital deaths ranked by the people in our writer's room. Of course, you probably have some more that are painful to you, that hit you hard, so leave us those in the comment below. Let us know what you think.
Thank you for being a loyal listener. Follow us wherever you get your podcast, because you don't want to miss the next episode. Soap Dirt is on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more.